Okay, so we're gonna pick up where we were last week. When I shared my thoughts, I was talking about John 4, the woman at the well, and the living water of Jesus. And I mentioned that it wasn't just by chance Jesus ran into this woman. There were some obstacles he overcame to get to that spot, and that was a whole different topic of discussion. Well, we're going to have that discussion tonight on the White Man Practice. So here we go. If you read John 4, there were three primary obstacles, we'll say, that Jesus had to overcome for that meeting to happen. And these three obstacles are the same type of obstacles that we still face a lot of times when it comes to interpersonal relations, talking to other people. That's the first one was racial. So what I mean by that, well, you got to look at the thing in context. The word Samaritan and Jew probably don't mean anything to you in your modern life. But in the time of Jesus, the Jews did not talk to the Samaritans. Pure and simple. There was a lot of racial and cultural enmity there. They did not get along. So Jesus, in fact, they didn't get along to the point where a Jew who needed to go from the northern part of Israel to the southern part would go miles and miles out of their way just to avoid going through Samaria, let alone talking to a Samaritan. So, Jesus was making that same sort of trip. And the normal thing to do, the thing that would have been expected of him, would be to go around Samaria to avoid any Samaritans. Well, that's what a good Jew did. You didn't talk to the Samaritans. No. The Jews actually would often refer to Samaritans as dogs. The quick history on that, the Samaritans were basically the Jews who during the Assyrian captivity intermarried with the other cultures. Short version. The point is, generally speaking, if you're a Jew like Jesus, you went really far out of your way to not talk to Samaritans. You definitely didn't make it a point to talk to them. But Jesus did. And it's not like Jesus didn't know she was Samaritan. He was walking through Samaria. Okay, he knew she was a Samaritan. Talked to her anyway. So that was the first obstacle, was the racial and cultural obstacle. What else? Well, in the time of Jesus, it was a patriarchal, we'll call it, society. It was very male-driven. And generally speaking, if you were a man, you didn't just talk to some random woman in the street, which is what this was. That wasn't done. You didn't do that. Pure and simple. If it was your wife or your sister or someone in your family, sure, you could talk to her, but you didn't just go randomly talking to some woman in the street. It wasn't done. Is that right? No. Was it as strict to say Islam is now in a lot of places? No. But it was a cultural thing, mainly. You didn't do it. So that was another hurdle Jesus overcame. Was, again, it's a cultural thing, but the gender gap, so to speak, was another obstacle to this meeting that Jesus had to get through, overcome, whatever word you want to use. And we have the same thing today, Not in the sense that you're not expected to talk to each other, but just sometimes we think differently. Me and my wife, our brains function on different wavelengths a lot of times. And that makes it hard for her to get what I'm thinking sometimes, and for me to get what she's thinking. And that's just something we have to deal with. It's part of life. Men and women are different, whether you want them to be or not. So, you had the cultural, racial differences, you had the gender difference, and then there was a third obstacle. And I can't really think of a good word for this one, so I'm just going to call it the sinner difference. Now, we're all sinners, yes. Except for Jesus, he wasn't. But you, me, everybody who's listening to this, everybody you know is a sinner. I don't care how good you think they are are sinners. That's what the Bible says. And you can look at their life and see where they do some things wrong. So we're all sinners. We've all fallen short. So for us, this gap's a little bit in our head, to be honest with you. Because I don't care how long you've been a Christian. I don't care how good you live your life. I don't care what you did as a kid. I don't care if you've never smoked a cigarette, drank a beer, done anything wrong. I don't care. You're still a sinner, just like everybody else. And another person's sin isn't any worse than yours is. If your biggest sin is you say a curse word here and there, and the guy you're trying to talk to's big sin is that he's a murderer, guess what? As far as God's eyes are concerned, he's no worse than you are. You're no better than him. You're both sinners. You both need Jesus. So, quick aside there, chased a little bit of a rabbit. But back to Jesus and the woman at the well. The sinner difference there. Now, how do I know she was a sinner? Well, for one thing, the verses point to that. How did Jesus know? Well, because he's Jesus. But let's say he wasn't Jesus. Let's look at this logically. You live in ancient Middle East. You don't have running water. You don't have anything like that. So if you want water, you got to go out to the well. You got to use a bucket and a rope to pull it out of the well, fill up your jug, and haul the jug back to your house. When would you want to do that? Would you pick the middle of the day when it's really hot and sunny, or would you do that in the morning or in the evening when it's nice and cool and not so sunny? Unless you're weird, you're going to say, I'm going to do it when it's not so hot. Well, if you read the John 4, it says that this happened at the 7th hour, I think. But the point, I don't have it in front of me. I want to say it was the 7th hour, is what it says. But the point is, the way they did time, this was right around noon. It was the hottest part of the day. It's the time no one's going to go out and get water out of the well because it's hot. No one wants to do it. But this woman was. Well, why would she? Did she just forget that morning and run out? That's possible. But probably not. More likely, it's exactly what it turned out to be. She had a reputation around town. Jesus asked her to bring her husband, and she said, well, I don't have one. He said, oh, no, you don't. You've had 5, and the man you're with now isn't your husband. You're not even married to him. So she got around. We'll just put it that way. And that reputation probably made it where she didn't want to go out around. She didn't want to necessarily be around, all the good, upstanding citizens because they knew she wasn't. So the inference there is the reason she was out in the middle of the day getting this water wasn't because she ran out that morning and forgot or overslept or any of that. It was she wanted to avoid other people. So, that was that gap. Now, our sinner gap, or whatever you want to call it, isn't that we're better than other people, it's that we think we are. Every one of us is guilty of it at some point. Some of us are more prone to it than others, just like everything else. But that being said, every one of us is at a time where we saw someone else doing something wrong, and we had the thought, well, at least I'm not like them. Even if you didn't say it out loud, you thought it in your head. And if you're saying you haven't, you're lying. And we've got to get over that. We've got to realize that we aren't any better than anybody else. We're all just sinners who need Jesus. And without him, we're out of luck. Without him, we don't have any hope. So, those are the obstacles Jesus overcame to meet this divine appointment that he had with this woman. The racial, cultural barrier, the gender barrier, and then the sin barrier. He overcame those things and was able to tell her who he was, to show her the truth, and she went out and told the whole town the truth. So, the same thing goes for us. We need to get over our stuff, get past our barriers, and get out there and tell people who Jesus is. walk worthy, and talk to y'all next time.